Hi everyone. I've decided to do a slightly different approach to reading Frankie Fish today. I've downloaded the ebook and I'm going to read without you being able to see my face today. But I think it would be a good way for you to follow the words on the page and you'll get to see the pictures a little bit easier as well. So we're up to chapter 10 and the chapter's called Fishy Business. So you'll remember in the last chapter Frankie and his granddad were in 1952 and they were going to try to stop the other granddad from changing the course of history. And so that meant that they went back to granddad's childhood home and they found the other granddad, the other old granddad, and he was about to knock on the door of young granddad's house. It was a bit confusing. There was a lot of granddads going on. And Frankie and his granddad managed to stop the other granddad from doing what he was going to do, which was telling his younger self how to win the race. So they're trying to fix history up a little bit, aren't they? And trying to prevent Frankie's family from disappearing. So, chapter 10, Fishy Business. The three fishmen collectively gulped and poked their heads around the corner like a set of terrible traffic lights, just in time to see the front door of the Fish family house opening. All three retreated faster than a rabbit after drinking too much red cordial. The two granddads and Frankie stood as still and silently as possible, listening carefully. Somebody stepped outside, and there was a scraping noise that sounded suspiciously like a suitcase being picked up off the ground. Then a cat's meow pierced the cold Glasgow air. "Ah, that's Mr. Wallace, our cat," whispered Grandad. "He was a cranky little thing, hated strangers, and always used to steal our black pudding." "What's black pudding?" Frankie whispered. "A sausage made from blood." Frankie gagged. Why would any person or cat eat, let alone steal, such a thing? Yuck. The next moment Mr. Wallace came slinking around the corner. He stared up at the three fishmen, frozen awkwardly against the wall, and then went right over to other Grandad and started purring loudly. "Mr. Wallace, is that ye purring?" someone called from around the corner. It sounded like a young man, maybe a young Alfie Fish. "Have you found a little friend?" Mr. Wallace meowed happily and loudly. Frankie closed his eyes, imagining the universe imploding at the exact moment the three Alfie Fishes lay eyes on each other. "Mr. Wallace?" the young man said again. There's the two granddads, Mr. Wallace and Frankie holding on for grim life. "Wash up for lunch, boys," came a woman's voice from inside the house. After another long, painful moment, they heard footsteps going back inside and the door closing with a bang. The three fishmen breathed a sigh of relief, but the drama was just beginning. Once again, the three poked their heads around the corner and gave a collective gasp, as they all saw the same thing. Nothing. The other sonic suitcase was gone. Grandad groaned loudly. "This is a disaster," Frankie cried. Other Grandad didn't seem to get it. "It's okay. We still have this one," he said, patting Grandad's sonic suitcase. And that's when Frankie found some of his Grandad's fireball ways. "No, it's not okay at all," he scolded. "Have you seen the Terminator, or Back to the Future, or the third Harry Potter movie, or even Doctor Who?" "Who?" replied other Grandad, confused. "Exactly," replied Frankie. "We cannot leave a time machine in the hands of unknowing people from the past. Anything could happen." He sighed and shook his head. "We need to send you home. The longer you stay, the worse the odds that trouble will find us." "But what if I don't want to go home?" asked other Grandad. "What?" came the dual voices of Grandad and Frankie. "I like it here. My memory is clearer, and I feel more like myself," other Grandad said, staring off into the distance. "The world feels safer than it does back home, too, and they'll probably let me drive as much as I want." Then he leaned heavily against the wall. There was a long silence. Frankie glanced at Grandad and saw from his face that he felt the same way as his time-travel twin, at least a little bit. Frankie leaned next to Other Grandad. "I think I get what you mean, Other Grandad," he said gently. "I do. See, I made a mistake, and now my school hates me, which is why I had to come stay with you for the school holidays, even though I didn't want to. No offense. Even though I never wanted to go back to school, I know I have to, because that's where my best friend, Drew Bird, is, and that's where my mum goes to pick me up, and where my annoying sister Lou is." Frankie swallowed. He never thought it'd be possible, but he actually missed his dumb family. "You need to go home. Get me and come back, Other Grandad, so that we can stop you from ruining everything," he said firmly. "Nana Fish needs you." His two granddads stared at him in astonishment. Frankie had surprised even himself with that speech, given that he wasn't much of a public speaker. The last time he'd done an oral presentation was in history class. He was supposed to talk about Apollo 13, and he'd vomited from nerves before the shuttle left Houston. It wasn't a small vomit either. He blew chunks. Hard chunks. Some carrot even landed on Mr. Bellaconi's leather shoes, which was weird because Frankie couldn't even remember the last time he'd eaten carrots. Other Grandad looked up, his eyes welling with tears. "But I'm scared," he whispered. "So am I," Frankie whispered back. "But it would be super weird if we weren't scared, considering the circumstances, right?" He smiled hopefully at Other Grandad. Then something bizarre happened. Other Grandad smiled back. "You're right," said the old man. "I'll go home with this suitcase, and you two can go recover mine." Then he took their sonic suitcase and squinted at the combination lock. 52% battery. That'll be more than enough. It loses its charge the longer you stay, but you only need 17% to get back. "I know," Grandad interrupted Other Grandad. "Just go already." And with the typing in of some coordinates, the use of the neighbour's backyard toilet without permission, and a muttered "Happy travels," the Other Grandad was gone. So that's the end of chapter 10. Chapter 11 will be Busted, which I'll do a post next week. See you guys.